So, what would you call the voice in your head which endeavours to discourage any changes? What might you call it? Or what are the type of things that, if on occasion you kind of push the pause button a little bit just to listen to those inner voices, what might they be saying in a negative way? They might be saying, oh, why bother setting goals, or why bother making changes? Oh, sure, look, why would you take that up? You never keep this up, so why start in the beginning? Look, it's too late for change. At 59 years of age, why would you be bothered changing? It's not worth all that effort. I'm better off just sitting here watching the TV. You have no willpower. You never have any willpower. Think of all the things that you started and you didn't finish. Think of those kettlebells that you bought off the shopping channel or now and that think you've no willpower. It won't make a real difference anyway. You're always useless at whatever it is, so why take on something new? And it's easier just to stay as you are. We've said that already. And things like, it's raining, it's cold, it's too warm, it's Sunday, it's Monday, I'm tired. These are all the sort of negative things that we can be saying to ourselves to hold us back from making any sort of positive changes in our lives. These two guys, I think they used to feature in the Muppet Show, can't remember their names, but they were constantly criticising. They never had anything positive to say about the acts that were on stage in front of them. For me, I call it the internal saboteur, or saboteurs in this case if you've more than one voice in your head trying to discourage you, trying to hold you back from making changes. I would call it the internal saboteur. You might like to consider a name for your own internal saboteur. You don't necessarily have to stick with mine. So the question has to be then, how do you deal with your internal saboteur? What would you have to do by way of tackling that internal saboteur? And the starting point has to be becoming aware of the type of negative self-talk before you can even set about challenging negative affirmations offered by the internal saboteur. So if you just reflect back to the previous slides and the examples I gave you of the critic, then that negative voice, they mightn't be in the exact words that you'd be familiar with, but I guess they're similar to the type of things that if you take time, you become aware of the type of dialogue that you can have that holds you back from making positive change. So you listen for that inner voice when it starts offering negative comments about situations and your capabilities. And then you counteract the negative with positive, realistic affirmations. So you challenge the talk, you challenge the critic. Why bother? Well, just because I didn't succeed last time doesn't mean I won't succeed this time. And just some Socratic questions that you could be using to challenge the internal saboteur would be, well, what's the evidence for this? Is this always true of me in every situation? Oh, I never able to do X and never to do. Is this always true? Am I being fully objective in relation to my perception of the situation? Is it really the case that I never succeed in anything, or I never fulfill a commitment or whatever? What are the odds of this really happening or being true? What's the very worst thing that can happen if I make this change, or if I take on this challenge, this goal? And what's so bad about that? And am I looking at the whole picture of what's happening, or could it mean something else? So back to that first access moment, you've had your first access, internal representation, and you're reaching some sort of decision about what's happening in front of you. And the question is, is that the whole picture of what's actually happening here, or could it mean something else? I'll just come back to this one for a second. Let me give you an example in relation to this one. You can follow your own first access in relation to the story and then see what sort of internal representation you're making out of it. So, most mornings I go out early, I have 3 dogs and I walk the dogs. And I would usually walk them in the park. You don't see very many people early in the morning, but there's one gentleman I see from time to time. Sometimes he just have a pram and a baby in the pram, or a child in the pram, and sometimes he has a dog and a baby in the pram. But I've never exchanged pleasantries with him because we're never that close. Okay? And so that's my only knowledge of this human being. Then this particular Saturday I'm in the park, and it's very early for Saturday. It's 7 a.m. and I'm walking there, and I see a silhouette in the distance coming toward me. And before I can recognise this person as the gentleman that I see with the pram, I can hear the clink of 2 large bags, and my conclusion is that these are filled with glass bottles. And again, I don't come close enough to exchange greetings with him, but he heads for the exit at the side of the park, and as he gets to the exit, he gets the 2 bags and he throws them under the hedge and walks out of the park. Check in with yourselves in relation to your first access in that situation. I know I was horrified that would happen. I stood there, I watched to see could I find out exactly where he lived. I'm going to do something about this. And then I asked myself the question, Brian, could it actually mean something else? And because I've forced myself and challenged myself to ask that question, I begin to think about it in a slightly different way. And I think, this gentleman, he has a dog. Why would somebody with a dog leave glass around in a park? And he seems to have, I think it's his grandchild as well. Would he not be, caring enough to make sure that that glass wouldn't be left around in the park? And then I think of the hour of the morning and the day, it's Saturday. Added to the fact that on Fridays in our park, a lot of the teenagers come into the park and a lot of them would be drinking. And my conclusion now is that this gentleman is doing his civic duty, that he comes into the park very early in the morning to tidy up all the bottles that the teenagers have thrown around. He leaves them in at the hedge. It's a designated spot because the park ranger doesn't come in until whatever time, 9:30 or thereabouts, if the park opens up. So I've gone from kind of a very, very clear impression of the situation to something very, very different, each of which creates a very different mood inside of me. So I'm no longer angry with this individual. I'm a lot more at ease within myself. Mindfulness. Now, mindfulness has been around again for thousands of years, and it seems to be coming very, very much back in popularity again. And it's really quite simple, mindfulness. Mindfulness is about giving yourself the present, of being present in the present. This is where we are now, in this room, floor 7, I think it is, in the Department of Agriculture. This is where we're at. An hour from now hasn't happened yet. An hour backwards is gone. This is where we're at. I'll give you an example on this that might help you understand the whole mindfulness principle. It might be better if I stand this side for this. Here we are in the present, okay? So this is me, and I'm on the Naas Road travelling to Newbridge, Department of Defence, Newbridge, to give a similar presentation. And I reach a point on, I'm sure it's not the Naas Road anymore, it's the end something or other, but I reach a point where everything grounds to a halt, right? Traffic has just stopped in front of me. For as far as I can see, the traffic has stopped. This is the present situation. I immediately then begin to move out into the future, and I can see the faces of all of those people in the room who are expecting me. I'm now visualising myself being late. They're going to think, how unprofessional of him, he said he'd be here at whatever time, and he's not here now. And I go further out into the future where I see the personnel officer in that department maybe getting on to my manager, complaining about the fact that they'd made this arrangement and, I hadn't turned up. And I even kind of open the angle even further, and I come out here where I'm now having this conversation 2 weeks on with my manager, trying to explain to her exactly what happened. Right? So the angle is widening further and further away from the present. Likewise then I dip into the past a bit. And I remember that last Christmas I had a similar situation coming in the other direction, and I was 4 hours without a wheel of my car moving. And then I go back to a further example from some years back where actually I had to just abandon the car altogether, park it on the side of the road because the traffic was not going to move, and just leave it there and walk to the nearest exit and get a bus to where I had to go. So I'm opening the angle in each direction, and the further I open it, the further I get away from the present. And of course, this is the only line here on this line where I can actually do anything. I can do nothing about the future. I can do absolutely nothing about the past. But here in the present, I have some control. So the first thing I might do, or the first thing I did do, is to start breathing deeply, because those anxieties were beginning to build up inside of me. I have a phone. I ring ahead to let them know what's happened. I rang home because I know my wife was at home listening to the radio. Has anything been on the radio in relation to this problem? And now I'm gaining control because I'm acting in the present and I'm being in the present. So the more we travel out into the future, or the more we begin to ruminate back into the past, the greater the angle we create away from the present. So we can open that angle up pretty wide into areas that we can do absolutely nothing about. We've no control over. Only place you have control is in the present, in the here and now. So I would call that angle the angle that misery